that nothing that Dave Chappelle said was profound. There was absolutely nothing profound about that. You don't get a cookie for recognizing that white supremacy, white supremacist patriarchy still exists in queer communities. We know that. You're not saying he didn't say anything that the Kambahi River Collective didn't say, that Audre Lorde didn't say, that Black queer people say every single day, but no one listens to us. But then
initially in my article, I wrote that the special was poorly written, and I am now on the fence. I don't know that it necessarily is poorly written. I think he wrote that section excellently to get a point across, and that point was to scapegoat the deaths of my community on my community.
That's why rape culture is rape culture, because people joke about rape all the time. So nobody takes it seriously. The state doesn't take it seriously. Police don't take it seriously. People's families don't take it seriously. It's the same thing with transphobia and homophobia, specifically transmisogynoir for Black trans women. Like, no one cares. And it's just like, all someone has to say is there's racist white people, and now nothing else matters. Like, you're not saying anything profound. Like, I'm not impressed at all.
He's either a brilliant bigot or an incompetent writer. Those are the only two options.
Damn. Because at no point did I hear him making fun of other Black dudes. Like, I'm trying to remember.
Never.
Did that happen?
Never.
No.
Nope.
And it never will.
Damn.
And he used to do that back in the day, but he probably realized that, like, those skits like that one where he like did crack or whatever, he realized I'm being laughed at. That's it.
But here it is. There it goes.
But he can't apply it to anyone else.
See, you are being laughed at, so you didn't want too many. You walked away from $50 million because you didn't want too many white folks getting too comfortable being able to say that stuff. If a joke isn't that serious, then why'd you stop, Dave?
Welcome in, everyone. Thank you for pushing through with me on all of this, because I am so excited to have you all here to talk. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go around, give a few introductions. It's wild to have you all here. So for anyone who's not familiar with some of the people on this panel, right above me, we have Jessie Gender, who uses she, they pronouns and is an incredible YouTuber. I found her through actually specifically her content on this particular issue on Dave Chappelle, but also her video unpacking TERFs and some of the discussion around that. Next to Jessie Gender, we have Juicebox, who uses he, him pronouns and talks, works on poetry. And I'm really grateful to have Juice here. Thank you for being a part of my mod team and for helping me as I learn and grow on a variety of issues. And then next to Juice, we have me. Oh, just kidding. We have Khadija. Khadija. No need. Khadija is an incredible YouTuber, but also just, you seem like an all-around creative, incredible singer, and you bring so much information through your YouTube essays with a lot of humor and just fun. I really appreciate that about you. So thank you for taking the time and being here. Yeah. What? Oh no, thank you. Technical difficulties they're doing me in today.
They don't want us to win. What's going on here? Something in the milk ain't clean. This is starting to look suspect.
That's fair.
Is it too many? Is it too much weirdness or whatever?
No, I fixed it. Everything's fixed. It's all me. I am the sus one. All right, we should be 100% good. But you know how things are. They come in threes, so we'll see. And then next to me, we have Dahlia Bell, an incredible comedian I'm very excited to have here. I found Dahlia actually through an article on The Guardian, very powerful article, unpacking some of the issues around Chapelle and talking about other comedians we could be uplifting. So thank you for taking your time and being here. Next to Dahlia, we have Malcolm, who is another one of those YouTubers, but does a lot of work around trans masculine representation, which we can see through the Dave Chappelle special and a lot of the discussions around transphobia that we're often lacking that representation. And last, but certainly not least, we have Spicy Daddy. What do you prefer to be called? You've had so many different names.
That's like my alias. Oh my gosh, that's my personal Twitter name. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
That's
I apologize.
that's no. It's okay. Like it's like public. I don't care. I know. I just say what I want there. But anyway, my name is Sonata. Wait, do you want me to? I
Hit it.
something. Okay, cool. My name is Sonata Jones. I am a digital artist and photographer, videographer. But before I started following my dreams, I was in academia and I got a master's in women's and gender studies. And I did a thesis about trans misogynoir and toxic femininity. And I basically like made a definition for it. And that is how I met Umi. So
yeah,
yeah, that's pretty much brief introduction. And my pronouns are they them.
yeah. So you might have caught them on our YouTube or here on this channel talking about that paper, and I really appreciate you joining us for another conversation, Sonata. Thank you.
No problem.
So we're gonna just go ahead and open up real quick with who of you grew up watching Dave Chappelle? Because I know I didn't. I caught wind of him through this particular controversy. I'm curious what he meant to you, and how has your perspective on him developed?
When I was a child, I really did not. I didn't understand. I thought it was a joke. Like I laughed at some of the stuff that he, said. I laughed at a lot of the stuff when I was a child, and it was funny. And to like older Black people around me, it was funny. And to older people in general around me, like he was funny. So I thought he was funny. And back then, I just did not know. I didn't understand the kind of harm that it caused. But that's pretty much what he meant to me. I thought he was funny until I got older and started to understand the reality of everything that he was saying.
Yeah. So he has a history of this then. Go ahead.
Yeah, for me, Dave Chappelle is only 8 years older than me. We're almost contemporary, so for me, it was just he was this goofy, zany guy who could, just be the stony friend that everyone wanted in the 90s. And then the Chappelle Show was fairly revolutionary. I don't know that Black America has had a show quite like that. Had a show quite like that for a few decades, honestly. The closest competitor possibly being In Living Color, which was nowhere near as intellectually developed as the Chappelle Show. Whereas his new stuff is what it is.
Yeah.
And for me, I grew up, so I guess I'm on the younger end of the spectrum. I was born in '95, so the Chappelle Show came out when I was still in elementary school, and that was my first introduction into him and his kind of comedy. And it was around this time. This was right before the Boondocks first aired, and it was still like the comic strip. And this was really like those two were a huge part of my developmental years into like social consciousness. I didn't understand everything that Dave Chappelle was talking about, but I knew about the Ku Klux Klan, so I knew about the Clayton Bigsby skit. I looked at that. I thought it was funny. I didn't get all of it, but it interesting to me to have it like portrayed in that light, and then going through like different skits here and there, and looking back at it, a lot of that stuff 8, 9-year-old Jews should not have been exposed to. Like it, for those of us who have seen it and grew up with it, like not definitely no, but I it influenced me, and I want to say for the better because it did open my eyes up to use and utilize humor in a way to explain the world around me, and like what was going on in my personal life with like the racism that I was going through, and the ones that I was observing through my parents and my family members. So in that sense, it was very impactful for me growing up. But as I got older and I would go and my sphere of influence, like things that I was grabbing like information as perspective from, expanded, and I realized later that a lot of the things that was being the messages and underlying tones in that show, and the kind of comedy that Chapelle specializes in, was not as intellectually honest and particularly thought-provoking as I thought it was when I was younger.
Mm. Anyone else want to hit that question? Or?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, coming at it from a slightly different place is like I grew up in, white kid in a mostly like small farming community. And so Dave Chappelle is like probably close to one of my first touchstones for like a black comedian when I was getting into stand up. And so it was very much like seen that way by a lot of the kids in my school. It's like, oh, you have your like Jerry Seinfeld, da 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 da, and then there's Dave Chappelle. And so in a lot of ways there was that sense of like, oh, I'm exposing myself to new different things, but also is very much tokenizing him in that way. And so there was a lot of like this sense of like, oh, I'm seeing a new perspective. When I saw something like Dave Chappelle and the Chappelle show and things like that. But as I've grown older, I think it kind of mirrors what people were saying earlier, that it's like kind of looking back and like, oh, seeing the problems with this, and then also my own perspective on it, like coming into this like, oh, I wasn't exposing myself. Like there was nowhere near an actual like wholly encompassing perspective that just watching one black comedian with very problematic views at the time like gave me as like a small white kid growing up in a mostly like white community, very obviously. So I think that that's the sort of like slightly different take that I could give there, in the sense that like I agree with every sentiment that's already been said, but mostly just like I also have this thing of like, oh, like look, I'm watching a black comedian, look how wonderful I am, which was like a lot of the sentiment of a lot of the kids in my age group in the community that I grew up in, because like look, we're not racist, we watch Dave Chappelle. And so that's sort of the only other like addition that I could throw into it, just basing off of my background coming into it.
Thank you. Also, welcome into Gapt, who uses any pronouns. Gapt, we were just in on the question on who grew up watching Dave Chappelle and what he meant, and how your perspective might have developed. So if you want to pop right in, briefly introduce yourself and get into the question, you are more than welcome to.
Hey, first off, hi everyone. I'm Gapt. A pleasure to meet you all. I'm a streamer on Twitch. I've been here for about a year. Most of my content is variety, but I love talking about like queer and black issues usually, just because that's the communities I'm in. Other than that, I don't think there's much else to say. Just follow me everywhere. Love me. Okay. So growing up with Dave Chappelle, honestly, I didn't really find most of his stuff funny. And I think that's more so because I feel as if Dave Chappelle's like so integrated in the black community. If you don't watch him, and say they're just like, "Oh, you're not black enough to understand this joke, this, that, and the other." I'm like, maybe it's just not funny. I'm personally not into it. I mean, he said a few funny things here and there, but my parents love his stuff. I've seen parts of it, but it's just not for me personally. But yeah, I don't think I have too much to say, as I don't have much experience with the man, so I don't care about him. So.
Fair.
Yeah,
I was
sorry about
gonna-
being late. My eyeliner broke, so I was like, never mind, no makeup.
The struggle of the eyeliner, I swear.
I was just like, I'm gonna be pretty, and then it just fell in the sink. I was like,
Oh
all right,
my
it's over. I'm done. I'm over.
Well,
Like,
we're
it's
glad
okay.
you
I'll
made
just
it
have
in,
a
though.
thank you.
Overcome the struggle of the eyeliner. That's
Mhm.
power. We're
I'll
here.
just have a bald face. Why not?
I was gonna say, an interesting, I guess I never really knew about Dave Chappelle. Like, I think I had like absorbed his stuff in passing, maybe, but I wasn't really that involved with it because, like, my parents are West African, but I was born and raised in the States, so like they weren't watching that kind of stuff. Like, my mom watches Nollywood films. Like, it's not like, and my dad watches CNN. But like, my older siblings would probably watch that kind of stuff. Like, when I was going to be on this panel, my older brother, he's in his late 30s, messaged me and was like, "Y'all canceling Dave Chappelle? LOL." I was like, "Did you read the name?" Like, damn. But either way, I moved to Canada when I was a teenager. So when I was like 15, and I remember so many white kids asking me if I knew who Dave Chappelle was and making me being like, "You don't know who Dave Chappelle is? You didn't know this sketch? James," like, they would just all do that. And so my introduction to Dave Chappelle was, and I don't want to trying to use this word carefully, but like, people would say like coonery, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. Like, and I don't want to call him that because I don't think Dave Chappelle is that, but like, I was like, there are too many white folks comfortable walking up to me saying I'm Rick James, bitch. And I don't know who this man is, but I don't trust this right now because y'all are a little too comfortable. So when he like left his show and all that stuff, I didn't even know about all of that. And I guess he did because he felt a bit like, uh-oh, this monster has it's gone beyond me now. Like, it's gotten into the popular culture.
And yet
like,
he keeps making.
I mean, we can talk about it, but
We are gonna talk about
kind
it.
of, my introduction was very much like white kids, teenagers telling me about him and making jokes. And I just was like, okay, like, sure.
Oof, yeah.
I know, very weird, like a different kind of.
Yeah.
In Canada, Calgary, Alberta, of all places.
In Canada.
He has reach.
Okay. Yeah, I just caught up and I was like, I don't want to be disrespectful in terms of, I don't know what people's experiences with him is, because I did recognize, like, and that goes into who's watched the special or who has read the transcript of it, because I did think, and this is my perspective on, like, he had some social commentary that hit on race, and I thought could reach some people, especially on some of the issues swelling up in the United States, getting some conversation. And so I was like, I wonder if he has had a good place or what place he's had for different people. And I really appreciate you, like, bringing your perspectives on that. And so when I did see the special, that's something that kind of caught my interest, specifically on his point regarding the white gay person that went to call the cops on him, and him saying, like, that's when you cease to be a minority, or they kind of give up that to call the cops, and highlighting that white privilege. So, well, some of the LGBTQ community have worked to address to some degree the disparities. We definitely still have a long way to go. Does any of you experience racism in the LGBT community? And what do you see as the next steps you'd like to see the community to take to fight racism, if you have anything in mind?
I think there's like in a lot of transmasculine spaces, surprisingly, I found a lot of people that are like supporters of, I don't want to say like Nazi stuff because I feel like it's not exactly Nazi stuff, but they're pretty like they're pretty far right in a really problematic way. And a lot of like transmasculine spaces are pretty whitewashed. Like it's usually, you know, like skinny white passing or like white cis passing trans guys that kind of occupy a lot of these spaces. But I think that's something that can be beneficial, at least as far as like creating spaces that are more inclusive is like when people like act a fool or like say racist shit in these kind of spaces, just communally like exiling these people. Like we don't really want anything to do with that. I think that if we were more collective in kind of the approach of being more comfortable, being like, that was fucked up, you're not going to be allowed in this space anymore. Like you need to find somewhere else to go. Instead of just kind of like, I feel like we kind of give like queer people like you were saying, Lemmy, like, just like a little bit more room because like they are marginalized, but like we can still hold them to like the same standard where it's like, well, you know, it's great that you're also marginalized, but we're not going to be racist. Like we're not going to do that. And we're not going to tolerate that in those spaces.
So I do want to just follow up on some of those points real quick. First of all, not exactly Nazis are Nazis. I'm not going to make any caveats for that. I am a product of the 80s and 90s, so plenty of cis gay racist nonsense, anti-blackness, absolutely prevalent, very outspoken and celebrated anti-Asian sentiment within the gay male community. That being said, I think what is often missed, because Dave Chappelle in a previous special commented on, you know, there being internal strifes within our community, which is true. And one of those internal strifes that I think people outside the community are failing to recognize is this push away from this sort of heterosexual homosexuality of the 80s and 90s to radical queerness. And I live in Portland, Oregon. So out here, if you say you're queer, it's more likely that you're pro-Black than that you've ever sexually engaged with someone of the same gender. You know, like that's more of a qualifier out here. So I see that progress already taking place. I do think it may be different between trans masc and trans femme, because honestly, especially when you're talking about white trans masc folk, you're definitely in a situation of potentially climbing up the social ladder. And the rungs of the social ladder are, of course, the necks of everyone beneath you. Whereas for trans femmes, the general assessment is that we are giving up our assumed privilege. So there's no point, there's nothing to gain from oppressing someone else.
Sorry.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't hear you. Go ahead. Go.
Oh, thank you. My experience is like being in the queer community, actually. I've always noticed, actually, let me preface this by saying I always tell people this, I am Black before I'm gay. And simply because they see color before they see my sexuality easily. So I've always experienced all my life that like I wasn't actually welcome in most queer spaces just because of me being Black, actually. And that's probably because I grew up in predominant white areas just because of my military background. And it's just unfortunate to the point that like when you're queer and Black, half the time the Black community can be pretty homophobic, transphobic, all that. It's unfortunately normal, I feel, as if in that community, which is sad. And then the queer community is just like, oh, you're Black, I don't like that either. So it's just like, where do you belong? And I've always hated that. This is why I don't go to Pride or anything like that. And I'm just like, I'm gonna advocate for Black rights first, and then we'll step on something else. But I feel like that's the wrong way to say it. But yeah, it's just being Black and queer is just hard. Some people are just so strong. Like, I don't know how y'all do it sometimes. Because I feel excluded always, or like tokenized if anything, especially here on Twitch, where I'm usually the only Black person on almost every show or thing I do. So yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go.
We're all like,
It's every online panel ever. It's like, oh no.
I know.
Not in my sphere. Everyone's talking over each other all the time. So I'm like, wow, everyone's so polite.
I think, yeah, I always kind of find this interesting because I do actually, when I think about it, I have more queer friends than not, but I also have a lot of friends that would be racialized as white, basically. And I use that language because I'm trying to, for myself, make sure that I remember that race is a construct. So when I say racialized before someone's race, that's why I'm saying it, because I really, it's like a practice for me to like not just say it, but believe it, like not to know it, but know it. But anyway, I find that one, a lot of people assume I'm straight because I'm very feminine. And I use they, them pronouns. My partner is very feminine. She uses she, her pronouns, but she's Black as well. But yeah, a lot of people, there's this assumption about what it is to be quote unquote Black, like a racialized Black person and gay. And I talk a lot about media on my little corner of the internet. So whenever I think about it, I'm always fascinated by the fact that I just feel like there's a lot of invisibility when it comes to being Black and queer. Because it's like kind of in the nature of coming out. A lot of Black parents, I don't know, I find that or non-white parents will do this thing where like the child will come out and so many of us have a understanding that you just don't talk about it again. So like my mom always talks about my husband and I'm like, girl, husband, you know, like, and it's just an interesting sort of thing of like how our parents always forget or they know we are, but they don't talk about it. So like they accept you and there are little gestures that to other people would be like, your parents aren't accepting you. But to us, it's like, oh my God, that's a huge gesture for them to like even do that small thing. Like, I'm not going to disrespect my parents and expect more of them to understand than they can, because that's just the way they are. My parents are African Muslims. The fact that they even know that I'm gay is a milestone. So I am not going to quote unquote put it in their faces necessarily, but I do still understand that me participating in that, it happens in the greater world too, where so many of the time we don't get to be like Lil Nas X and be in people's faces. Like when Lil Nas X first started doing stuff, I was a little uncomfortable. And I have known queer people most of my life. I'm gay as the day is long, but I was still feeling a little weird. And I finally had to stop and be like, oh, I'm just not used to seeing Black men kissing each other and it just being like, just this is a part of the music video. Or a young Black man just being like, oh, I love this. And I know I'm speaking very like in a cis queer way. So I apologize for that. I just don't like talking for people. So that's just my perspective. But yeah, I just think that there's this level of invisibility when you're talking about being a non-white queer in general. But then when you think about Black queerness, yeah, there's this invisibility. Don't talk about it. Hush, hush. Black gay people don't exist, or if they do, they know too many white people and the gay rubbed off because that's not a Black thing, that's a white people thing, or you know, and it's very like
that part.
Like I don't know. I think part of that, as much as this weird as it sounds, and I'll be done in a second, part of that has to do with the media. Because the media tells us a lot about what we're supposed to see and what we're supposed to interact with. And I see so many depictions of cis Black gay men as like, girl, honey, yes, oh my, child. And it's like, okay, yes, Black men like that do exist. Yes, 100%. But that is not the only
and I love them.
I love them. Come on. And Lena Waithe is not the only queer woman on the planet. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, I see so many movies with white girls. What is it? This is like a TikTok is like barely touching and breathing into each other's mouths for 90 minutes. And that's the queer story. It's like a period piece, but then you try to find any sort of like Black queerness. And it's so like, because it's so invisible and so unspoken and the Black community is so, at least in my experience, so conservative, it is very difficult. Like, I don't think people really understand how conservative Black folks are.
Just real quick, I grew up and came out in the Midwest in the 90s. So Black sexuality was very much enforced through violence. And I understood that very quickly, that me expressing myself the way I do could result quite probably in my assault and or death. And that was just a given, and that's what I accepted. So with that in mind, like Lil Nas X didn't shock me. Lil Nas X still doesn't shock me. In my world, Lil Nas X is just a pop star like any other. I had to get in where I fit in. And in the 90s, that meant all of my friends sold drugs. My friends were sex workers. My friends were squatters. I went with whoever wasn't actively threatening to end my life.
And
And to oh sorry.
You go ahead.
I think we all started talking at the same time.
Yeah.
No, sorry, you go.
Okay. So Khadija, you brought up a pretty interesting point when you're talking about the last question. Said that your exposure to Dave Chappelle was at least large in part white kids who come up to you and start quoting his skits, like the Rick James skit and all that. And I'm gonna tackle this question actually from that angle. So a lot of my experience being in like white queer centered spaces is those same kids who grew up with some proximity to black culture or black aesthetic or black people, whether that's like physical proximity or they just were exposed to a lot of black media growing up. That those same kids also occupy white queer spaces, and my experience my negative experience in that regard has largely been those same kids who believe because they grew up this way around in this environment that they can talk to me in whatever like language, whatever like slang, all this quoting things to me, expecting me to relate to them, and that has always made me the most uncomfortable of everything I've experienced. Even if I did know what they were talking about, I usually did, and they were using it wrong. It was just like that expectation that you think that I'm okay with you saying these things to me, saying these things around me because you heard it from your black friend, or you saw it on a some TV show, or you watched a movie, and you think this is how black people talk and this is how black people are acting around you all the time. That has always been like that level of ignorance and just propping up their experience as the universal one that they should expect out of every black person they meet has always been just the worst, most egregious examples of racism within white queer spaces that I've experienced. And it's been like overall, but also like in my like interpersonal relationships, it's caused so much division and grief on my part. And I feel like white people in these spaces need to realize that just because you have some level of proximity to black people growing up either in black queer spaces or what have you, wherever that those experiences come from, that does not mean that gives you, because you are also a minority, that does not give you the pass, give you the reach to go and perpetuate that towards all other black people that you meet, or all the racial minorities that you come into contact with. And when somebody calls you out on that, somebody tells you, hey, what you're doing, what you're saying right now is wildly inappropriate, you need to reel it back, and you become defensive, and because you think that you're not one of the bad people, you're not one of the people that you're on the right side of these issues, that you can't possibly be someone who's perpetuating these things towards another black person, towards a black person. Whatever that person's saying goes one ear right out the other, and I feel like that's, as far as like what people need to keep in mind, what needs to be done moving forward, we need to see more of is people being accountable to themselves, and all the white people holding them accountable for things that they say as well.
It's like putting yourself at the victim vantage point only, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that's the vibe that I got the whole time I was watching this Chapelle special. Because, like, yeah, I'm queer. I identify with they, them pronouns, and I'm Black. But, like, there are certain privileges that I have, even being as dark-skinned and all the other things, that I have to acknowledge, even within queer space, you know? Like, there are certain jokes I'm not allowed to make. Like, I'm not allowed to make that, and that's okay. But it's so hard when you have felt like you have also been, he talked about punching down a lot and all that stuff, but maybe you felt like you've been punched down on your whole life. So you think that you're in the same level playing field when it's not the same thing at all. And you were talking about that anyway, but yeah, sorry.
My thing is, I don't care if it is the same playing field. Lateral oppression is still oppression.
Well, that too, exactly. Like, even if, like, I hate to use that kind of language, I guess. So thank you for making me be a little bit more specific about it. But I think, yeah, people tend to just, it's like, even if everyone's on the same playing field or whatever, like you were saying before, it's like climbing on other people's necks to get that tiny bit of leverage above everyone else. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
One interesting thing that I've seen, like, from my perspective, is I've been in mainly like white-centered spaces in a lot of my life. And so, like, before I came out, I grew up in a small conservative community, and I was seen as like a dude, like a cis dude, even though I wasn't. There's a lot of like entitlement to Black culture and Black spaces, but only like the awareness of what white folks have. So, like, even talking about Dave Chappelle, like you mentioning like the jokes of Rick James bitch and all that shit, like that was ubiquitous in like my school growing up. And just like, and there was like one Black kid who I didn't really know, but there's one Black kid in my whole school, and we all just felt like entitled to just use like, oh, we're entitled to Black culture, the limited view of Black culture that we're given, which is like presented to us like, oh, this is the Black culture that white people should be consuming, and sort of that's our perspective on it. And then so there's like this entitlement in those like completely cis white spaces to Black culture and only the Black culture that we see. And then the shift that I saw coming out as a trans woman and going into queer spaces that were still mainly white focused was this shift to like a paternalistic, like sort of like infantilizing of Black culture, and also like anyone like that had sort of an intersectional identity in that way. Like, I went to work for, in Los Angeles, the Advocate, Out Magazine, Pride.com. And the entire time I worked there, it was very much run by gay, white, cis dudes who always felt like they had like this, oh, we're going to platform a Black person. We're going to get one Black, we're going to get one Black gay guy in here who is very similar to how we see gay white culture, who is just like over the top flamboyant. And so it's like trying to get as many people as close to who they are, like gay straight, gay Black men, cis Black men. And then the same sort of thing would happen to me as a trans white woman, where I was also seen in this way of like, I was literally the one trans woman at that entire company. And so anytime there was a trans issue, I was brought in to be like, you're going to speak about the trans issue now. Like for example, like I like was asked to like interview this trans woman politician who I did not know at the time. I'm more aware of politics now than I was then, but like I was mostly just an entertainment person. But it's like, you're gonna interview this trans woman in politics because you're the one trans woman. We don't want to have like a gay dude interviewing her. We want to see true trans women talking. It's like, I don't know what I'm talking about, and it was their questions that I was handed to be able to do that. So so when I moved into queer space, when it was just a cis straight white space, it was just this entitlement to everything, anyone's culture. Whereas shifting to a queer space, it was still this sense of like, we're the entitled one, but it became much more like, oh, we're going to have this paternalistic sort of like view of all other cultures. And even then, only like one, if we're going to talk about it in terms of intersectionality, like one identity away, like I'm a white trans woman, as opposed to like a gay Black man, like one identity away or two identities away from just like gay white dudes, cis dudes. And not really even seeing like there was no real discussion other than like there's no discussion of Black trans women at all other than, hey, look, they're murdered and another Black trans woman was murdered this week, so we're going to put her name in the article of Black trans women that we have. Like, we had an ongoing article of every time a Black trans woman died, we'll put her name in the article. So there's like this ongoing list, and that was the only mention of Black trans women in that space at all.
Yeah. I live in Atlanta. I live in Atlanta now, so I don't really, and I most of the people that I'm around are Black queer people in Atlanta, and so I'm not necessarily in spaces where I am subjected to that unless I'm at a shoot and I'm hired by someone who is non-Black. But prior to that, in academia, I experienced that heavily. In my department, there were no Black full professors. There were no Black queer full professors. There was only one queer professor who was my mentor. And apparently, halfway into my program, I found out that they treated them terribly. Most of the people in the department for my master's program were white women, cis white women, very rich cis white women, by the way. But I also say that to say that nothing that Dave Chappelle said was profound. There was absolutely nothing profound about that. You don't get a cookie for recognizing that white supremacy, white supremacist patriarchy still exists in queer communities. We know that. He didn't say anything that the Kambahi River Collective didn't say, that Audre Lorde didn't say, that Black queer people say every single day, but no one listens to us. But then when a very, in my opinion, incompetent person with no range at all to discuss the issues that he wanted to enforce his opinion on, who also happens to have a very large platform, uses his platform to try to use racism as a smokescreen for transphobia and homophobia that he resonates with, and that a lot of people, a lot of cis people in general, not just cis het people, but cis Black people and cis people in general, resonate with. He didn't say anything profound, and I literally, if this is okay, as I was watching it with disgust, I took notes and took his quotes, because I was just like, the fact that he's saying this stuff is just so like absurd to me, and the fact that the crowd is like, yeah, like you have a point. Like, no, he doesn't. He talked about the baby, which I'm not sure if everyone on this panel is familiar with the baby, but I will say it very briefly. He is a used to be, like, literally like 3 months ago, very popular rapper, very, very popular Black rapper from Charlotte, North Carolina. He performed at Rolling Loud Miami, had a performance, did his thing, and literally just out of nowhere makes a ridiculous comment about LGBTQ people and AIDS. I'm not gonna go into it. People can look it up on their own. It's horrifying, because it's like you're performing and you just say this out of nowhere. Like, it's like
It was literally no one asked it.
unprovoked.
Yeah.
Unprovoked. The crowd was silent. The crowd was silent when, like, it was crazy. And so he uses the baby as an example. First of all, he says that the baby made an egregious mistake, which he did not. He did that on purpose. And even after there was public, like, outcry, he still was like, I didn't say anything wrong. I didn't say anything wrong. And then people started dropping him from shows and like all those things and stuff like that. And he uses him as an example. And he says, the baby, I don't know if you guys know about this too, but the baby, like a few years ago, he killed someone in Walmart. Like, he shot them in Walmart. And Dave Chappelle uses this as an example, and he says, no one cared when the baby shot someone in Walmart, but then when he says something about the TLGB plus community, now his career is tanking. And to even say something like that throughout his entire stand-up, what I just really noticed repeatedly was that he just completely erased Black LGBT plus people like Black people do all the time. Like everyone does all the time, not just Black people, but white people do it, non-Black people in general. So we are erased, just like someone brought up earlier, we are erased by our own people. We are erased by the queer communities. We are just like completely erased. And then and just to sit here and watch this man talk about issues that he has no range on and just completely erase the experiences of Black queer people while also reaffirming jokes that are rooted in violence against us, and also painting the LGBT plus community as just white people, and saying, and he even says in the stand up, I'm so happy, like, I'm jealous of them because of the progress that they've made. Like, your movement has made so much progress. What progress for Black LGBT plus people? Black trans women have an average life expectancy of under 35 years old. 29 states don't even have full state protections for LGBT plus people. Black queer people are more likely to face food insecurity, financial insecurity. We're more likely to be homeless. We're more likely to face depression. We're more likely to face sexual assault. So where is this progress that you speak of? Because there's this significant group of people, and Black queer people create the culture. We create culture more than just, when you look at Black people, yes, Black people create culture, but then Black queer people, we create Black culture, which therefore creates culture for the entire world. And that's just that. But even then, regardless of that, we're still just erased. And to watch this man just say that he had a valid point just because you're acknowledging racism, you don't get to acknowledge racism in communities that have white people and be like, oh yeah, so everything else he said, like, there's nothing wrong with what he said, it's just a joke. It's not just a joke. Like, the things that I just said, all of those statistics that I just read off, those things are rooted in those issues not being taken seriously, which also comes from jokes. That's why rape culture is rape culture, because people joke about rape all the time. So nobody takes it seriously. The state doesn't take it seriously. Police don't take it seriously. People's families don't take it seriously. It's the same thing with transphobia and homophobia, specifically trans misogynoir for Black trans women. Like, no one cares.
Thank you.
And it's just like, all someone has to say is, there's racist white people, and now nothing else matters. Like, you're not saying anything profound. Like, I'm not impressed at all. So
It's like the
I went
total
on a
thing.
rant.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. I was
No,
done.
I took notes too because I was like, oh Lord. I was like pushing it off to the last minute to watch it. I was like, I gotta take notes. I have the one part where he was like, is it possible that a gay person can be racist? I was like, sir, I literally put after it, is it possible that a gay Black person can exist? Is it like, I just was like, what?
Thank you.
I literally, the whole time he was talking, I was like, you need to be specific with your language. If you are talking about white queer folks, you need to say that with your chest.
Then talk about white people.
Yeah. Your white dollars. You don't want to get rid of that. So you can't say white queer people. It's very easy for you to say queer and code it as, oh, it's just white folks. Where at one point he said, the one time he mentioned not even Black trans women or anything. He just said a gay Black man. He was like, because a gay Black man wouldn't have called the cops. And it's like, okay.
The only time.
I was like, that may be true, sir, but also, like, I literally, and I
what
remember
does that have to do with anything?
Literally had nothing to do with it. I was like, where is this coming from? Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Continue.
And even then, but that's also problematic because a lot of, like, that's a thing in Black communities too, where Black queer people are harmed and by other Black people, and we don't say nothing because we don't want to say nothing because they're Black. So that's not a good thing either. Like it's not.
And that's the other thing, that erasure of Black queerness literally gets us killed, because I've had friends who went missing. Nobody reported it. We just find their bodies. Their families aren't looking for it, because that's the queer kid. You just don't talk about it. So.
Thank you. Oh, I appreciate you diving into the topic. I was gonna go into. I think you all already covered so many of the follow-up questions on that one, because I wanted to go into does the racism from the LGBT community hit different than the racism out of it? And
Ooh, I can actually say more
Not
about
hit
that
different.
actually. It
I don't
kind of
think it
does
does.
though. Sorry, go ahead.
For
no.
me,
If you have some,
no, for me, yeah, we'll trade off. It'll be great.
You're all right.
Yeah.
Let's go. Okay, so like I always found it very surprising that like queer people, especially like gay white men, since I interact with them so much, like equal rights this on the other. I'm like, sir, I opened up my grinder today, and your profile said no chicken wing. What is that exactly? They put no. They
Wait,
put
what?
yes, that happened,
Yeah.
and this is when I lived in
Mhm.
Atlanta. They put no chicken wing / sushi emoji. I
So
was
I
like,
don't use dating apps at
I
all.
was
So
just like,
that's what they because
So
before it was no
that's still
fast, no
going on.
that
transformation.
still
Now
happens,
It's still a
yeah.
thing. It's still a thing. It's very much still
Yeah.
a
But this is
thing.
what I tell people.
Yeah.
It never goes away. It just finds sneakier ways of
Mhm.
being unsaid. And that is the sneakiest way I have heard so far of someone saying no blacks or Asians. Like, that is
Like,
wild.
I hated it. I was just like, why trying to make this cute? Just call me a slur at this point, please. Make
Yeah.
it easy.
And that is why 100% of my friends are black and radically queer, because I can't anymore. So for me, I would say it doesn't hit differently for me. For me, racism is racism. And I think that is the lack of nuance that Dave Chappelle is missing. I don't care who the racism comes from. It's racism. That's the issue. I don't just because that guy you called me a racist slur and then had sex with another dude. The second part doesn't matter. That's like that. It's literally, and I said this in my piece for The Guardian too. His entire argument is the equivalent of what about black on black crime? It means nothing.
Yes.
Mhm.
It was also giving very much, I can't be transphobic. I have a trans friend. That's
Yes.
the vibe I was
That-
getting a lot
Absolutely.
towards
Yep.
the end. And it was kind
Yep.
of sad to see because I was like, this story is very sad. And honestly,
Yeah.
the last 15 minutes, it was compelling. I was like, oh, this is interesting that he's talking about this. But then I was like, you're using your
It's
friend.
the
Yes.
deflection.
Your
Yeah.
deceased friend at that. Your deceased friend at that.
And
Yeah.
talking about
Terrible.
trans suicide rates, like, why does that happen, Dave? Could you
Yeah,
Yeah.
can
And
we-
jokes that you make.
Well, and the
Can-
framing
so can-
around it too was where he was talking about like he like loosely alludes to it. I don't think he says it directly, but he's like, "Oh, well, you know, maybe if everybody on Twitter wasn't like dragging my friend for sticking up for me or like saying that I wasn't transphobic, like maybe I don't know, like maybe she would still be alive." And just like the framing of that was really tasteless and like
And-
just pretty
That's the
disgusting
thing.
in
That
general.
was the entire purpose of that story. And this is what it I'm sorry, I'm salty on this at this point. My inbox is full of hate mail right now. And most of this hate mail, it's a bunch of cis het white dudes coming into my inbox to tell me how my community is guilty for the death of Daphne Dorman. That's the main talking point because initially in my article, I wrote that the special was poorly written. And I am now on the fence. I don't know that it necessarily is poorly written. I think he wrote that section excellently to get a point across. And that point was to scapegoat the deaths of my community on my community. And in order to write my piece, in order to respond to these people, I watched that special twice. I watched it once just as a comedy audience. I watched it a second time as a columnist. And then I read the transcript to make sure I wasn't misquoting him. And I could only make it through the Daphne Dorman bit once because it's so grotesque, dehumanizing, and I felt nauseous. And now to have, I even had this discussion, and this is not a humble brag because it was not the highlight of my day, but I had this discussion with Talib Kweli a couple of nights ago, in which he's like, yeah, but her family sides with Dave Chappelle. What about her family? What about her family? To which I had to just stop. I'm like, please do not cite a trans person's family of origin to justify anything you're saying. That's not who we're relying on. The people I rely on, tell me what Daphne's trans friends think. Tell me what her family of choice thinks. Tell me what her trans roommate thought. Tell me how her child feels. Her child who Dave Chappelle, despite being such a great friend, didn't know about until his friend was dead. Also, while you're, scapegoating her death onto online bullying, Dave Chappelle is a millionaire. Dave Chappelle is claimed to be the greatest living comic. Dave Chappelle has an army of supporters who have no problem attacking me as a Black trans woman for making any critique of Dave Chappelle. But Dave Chappelle couldn't raise one finger to type, hey, leave my friend alone. That's not on me. That is 100% on Dave Chappelle.
The other, because what you said just got me thinking. Like, I can feel the heat off the screen too. I'm like, come for it. Sorry. Yes. But his, one, I was watching the entire time thinking, if he had replaced any time he had said gay or trans or anything with Black and been a white dude saying that, people would be rioting in the streets. Like, I was like, imagine him saying I have a quote that's just the transgenders. I was like, sir, what? And on top of that, I just felt like, on top of using his supposed friend, all of this stuff, I think another thing that we have to consider is celebrity. A lot of celebrities, I understand that fame can be a kind of, and someone else said this, a sort of abuse in a way of how people will treat someone that's famous because they don't think they have feelings. Everyone is still human. Even if you're a Beyonce, you're still a person. If somebody's saying horrible, mean, dragging you things, it's going to hurt 100%. But being more in the public eye, sometimes you just have to understand that you, one, have way more power than even you think you do. Two, with that, sounds cheesy, but it does come with a lot of responsibility. So you do have to take that on. Three, also understand that, yes, you have feelings, but you're also, when you get to a certain level like that, it's not about you. It's about what you represent. It's the entity of Dave Chappelle. It's not even Dave Chappelle born in his birth certificate, whatever town he's from, who his family knows. There's that, and then there's Dave Chappelle. And he was acting in his Dave Chappelle-ness very irresponsibly, aggressively so, and doing it all under the guise of like, I love queer folks, but we all just gotta joke around and get along. And like, I loved your quote, bitter old men griping about progress are killing comedy. Because that's the thing. It's like, to me, most of the time, I didn't think it was even funny. And like, I'm someone who can make fun of myself. I love jokes. The only joke I laughed at that I distinctly remember laughing at was when he was like, they're after you. And he was like, is it one day or multiple? Like,
That was funny.
Yeah.
I was like, damn.
Good trans jokes are actually really hilarious. Like a lot of like queer people especially have a really good sense of humor because a lot of the time you have to like let it roll off your back when people are coming at you really hard. You have to like make light of a lot of the horrible things that people say to us. And I love trans jokes that are actually funny, but just the same tired like I identify as like a leaf or like, oh, the transgenders or whatever. It's like if we could be creative in our comedy, because that part was actually funny. I was like, that was a good joke. Like if he could just and again, I don't think there's an issue with like people making trans jokes, like trans jokes can be funny, but the idea of like you were talking about, like being responsible with your platforming and then making sure that it's like good quality content and not just like the boring, tired, like, oh, well, if you want to be called ma'am, you have to call me your highness. Haha. It's like, I've never heard that one before. Like, tell another joke, please.
One of the interesting things I saw about the special was like a lot of the quote unquote jokes that he made. Like I from on my Dave Chappelle video that I did, a lot of the comments are again coming from cis het white dudes being like, those are really funny. I was laughing the entire time. And it's like the jokes that he was telling were just like the stuff that gets weaponized against me and I'm sure many of you as just trans hate. It's just trans hate, just like like just being put up in a comedy special, but it's just the same exact jokes being told, and it goes back to this idea that I was saying is like this is like white people sort of like they don't have exposure to like what trans folks like experience. I should say white cis het folks don't have exposure to like what trans people experience every day, and so like this comedy comes to them as like, oh, this is revelatory and new and something I've never heard before, when it's just crap that like trans people in general just get all the time. And just like it just serving it up to them is like, oh, this, and it also the way he like phrased certain things just is speaking to how a lot of these communities already talk about like trans people just in general. And so it's just like trying to normalize that and say, oh yeah, the way you talk about trans like women as like just these gross, disgusting things is just normalizing that and serving that up to people saying like, yeah, no, that's fine and normal and totally okay. While also, as many people have already pointed out, it's like it's just like completely just focusing in on like trans women, specifically the white trans women, while completely erasing
Always.
black trans women within that, and just like, oh, here's the misogyny targeted at white trans women that also gets tossed at black trans women without recognizing the other stuff that black trans women get. And just like serving that up as like this is what how you should talk about trans people, and then completely erasing black trans people within that. So
And so
Right.
people understand that this is not a matter of like me trying to censor or tell my fellow comedians what they can or can't joke about. That is not where I'm coming from. What I keep trying to stress to people, and I think keeps getting lost somehow, is that as a comedian, my job is to make you laugh by saying something silly. If you get mad at the silly thing I said, then that means I didn't do my job. You're not getting paid to laugh at my joke.
Right. And another thing about Dave Chappelle for me is that in discussing racism in queer communities specifically, he doesn't acknowledge how much of his humor actually emboldens the same people that he is trying to critique allegedly. A lot of his humor and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people on this panel have said that they have been approached by white people who say his jokes and think that they resonate with black people because of that, or that they can joke about that. And Dave Chappelle is on one of the most popular streaming platforms in the world, lining his pockets and lining the white CEOs of Netflix's pockets
Mm-hmm.
with money because of his comedy special. So in trying to critique these this group of people, but also just homogenizing queer people in general and all of our experiences, it doesn't acknowledge how he also contributes to that and how he also benefits from that as a black cishet man. You benefit from that. And honestly, a lot of people, cishet people and cis people in black communities, like what was said earlier, are very conservative. So honestly, like Dave Chappelle, your views are more similar. You resonate more with
Mm-hmm.
Donald Trump than with black queer
Yeah.
people. That's just the reality of it. Like your view, like his views of the world are more aligned with people like Donald Trump, the same people he claims he's trying to critique. You benefit from that, and it's just like it's just an empty critique. And just like what was said earlier, he weaponized his friend's death,
Yeah.
who his alleged friend's death, to try to make a smokescreen around him emboldening transphobia and homophobia. You can be funny without emboldening violence. You can be hilarious without trying to make a joke or a mockery out of things that result in people being murdered. That is literally what is happening to black queer people. And who are black queer people the most harmed by? Whether you're talking about black women, black queer women, whether you're talking about black trans women, regardless of their sexual orientation. When you talk about black lesbians, black non-binary people, black asexual people, black disabled people, black cis women, who are all of us the most harmed by, statistically, black cishet men.
sorry, just because your point, like, the first thing I thought about was the legacy of Black comedians dressing up as Black women to make jokes and to build that audience. And I was like, we can't ignore the through line of blackface minstrelsy with that. Like, that's one of the most obvious ones there, because if you look in the background, you look real close in the footage of some of these old videos of blackface, you see Black people laughing right along with the blackface. Either because they were uncomfortable, because they were, some people are like me, nervous laughers, or they actually just thought it was funny. Either, I don't know their intention, but either way.
Or their white friend told them they needed to be able to take a joke.
Exactly. Right. But either way, that's how it's been for a long time, right? So you can be a part of a certain group and still be laughing while someone is making fun of your very identity or existence. So whenever people are like, oh, well, there are queer people, I'm queer and I wasn't offended by it. Good for you, girl. Congrats.
Other people were.
Congratulations.
Because obviously you have privileges that prevent you from even probably experiencing the thing that he's joking about.
Yeah, because people forget about class.
Thing that a lot of people don't acknowledge. Exactly. Class.
Yeah, like you could be in all those spaces and be classed a certain way, so you don't even have to think about that. That's like, but I just like, it's like we were laughing along with Black men when they were making fun of when Martin was doing Shanae or whatever, you know, like we were laughing right along. Not all of us, but you know, some of us were laughing right along with that because we were nervous, because we laughed and we were uncomfortable, or because we actually thought it was funny, or people told us we need to take a joke. Like, and we're just talking about like cis Black women. So we're getting further and further into it. And like, it was funny for a while, but after a while, like just for my introduction of Dave Chappelle and then seeing this special, and again, the point of like most of his stuff is towards a certain audience. It'd be more related to a Trump supporter than it would be to like someone like me. It's just like, he thinks because of the body he's in, he's allowed to make the jokes, or he can be the great Black hope to wedge a divide, to come and fill the chasm between queerness and race. And in the meantime, he's just, it just keeps going back to, in the meantime, he literally just keeps acting like Black queer people don't exist.
Right. Which also shows how much he doesn't care, because he's also hierarchizing these very intersectional forms of oppression. And, you know, with a lot of Black people, it's like, well, you can see that, you know, I'm Black. You can't see that someone's queer. For a lot of queer people, you can. I go out on the street. I'm obviously, the way that I dress, the way that I present myself, I am obviously not like a cishet person, and I'm always treated that way. And it's just like, yeah, that was my point. That's all I have to say about that.
One of the interesting,
cut somebody off.
The whole time I was growing up and being called the F word and being beaten up in school for it and having books knocked out of my hand and used to beat my face in, people knew I was gay. It was very well known.
One interesting question, since we're touching about the intersectionality that he quite often misses, that I found interesting, but I'd be curious if anyone else did, just from my perspective, was like he cites in the special specifically Sojourner Truth's "Ain't I a Woman?" And how like,
which is a misquote, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's like it's just interesting because that essay is about how, because she was Black, Sojourner Truth her womanhood was denied in feminist spaces, and like they refused to sort of see her as a woman, as a full woman and a full person because of her Blackness. And then he goes on later on in the special to say he's on Team TERF, and Team TERF, TERFs are the same sort of feminism that, number one, are denying trans people in general's womanhood just to dehumanize trans people in general, and then also still have that same sort of denial of Blackness, and will tokenize Black people to say, like, look, we have one Black TERF in our group, so it's okay that we're, very racist, misogynistic just in general towards trans people, Black people, and erasing Black trans women. So it was so weird to me to hear him cite Sojourner Truth's "Ain't I a Woman?" specifically call that one out, and then not realize the intersection of how that connects with TERFs and how they're very much the same exact types of feminists today, that I just found fascinating.
Thank you for bringing that point up. Absolutely.
I always found what I found really weird in his special, when, like, I think someone said that, like, his stuff is made for like a Trump supporter, basically. He was very, very comfortable using the N word with the hard R in the whole special,
Mhm.
and then like the whole audience is laughing, and I was just like, "See you? Aren't you?"
When
What?
people, it's the N word in mixed company. You know, when people get a little
Yes.
too comfortable, like there are
Exactly.
certain like queer jokes that I won't say around straight people because I'm just
Mhm.
like, I don't want you to think that I'm giving you permission by saying it in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't
Exactly.
even realize. You're giving people permission by saying it in front of them in a
Mhm.
weird way, even if you don't mean to.
Because like
Intention and impact.
they're gonna repeat that joke to me on one day probably. So I'm
Mhm.
just like, why y'all laughing? It's weird.
Yeah. And honestly, one of my favorite trans jokes of all time was written by a cishet dude. A colleague of mine, Milan Patel, like probably 3-4 years ago, wrote this joke about if he ever has a daughter and she wants to transition to being a man, he's totally going to support her. He'll even buy her the dick, but she has to earn the balls for himself. It's a funny joke. It's messed up, but it's funny. It's funnier than it is offensive. Dave Chappelle is not meeting that standard. And I don't know why anyone is giving him a pass on that. He's not making a valid social point, so he can't be defended on that basis. He's not writing new or original jokes, so he can't be rewarded for that. I don't get it.
I
I
think
also
it's.
want to bring.
Oh, sorry.
Ooh,
No.
can I say this quick quote real quick? Because just bouncing before I forget, because I'm a Gemini and my mind is like, I forget. Like, I literally forget
And now we
everything
hit the
I'm about to
astrology
say.
section.
Yeah. The astrology gaze. But he literally brings up, he says, and I quote, that he respects the Stonewall gays because they, quote, didn't take shit from anyone and stood up for what they
Mhm.
believe in. And that he doesn't like new age gays because we're too sensitive. And I just laugh at how contradictory that is, because you're saying that you
Yes.
respect the Stonewall gays because they didn't take nobody's shit. And this is us not taking your shit. This is why this is why people are mad, because we don't want to take your shit and we're not dealing with this. Like it so why is it different? Like why, like it's just so contradictory to me. And everything that he was saying was just very, very contradictory, and just really all a smokescreen, a very elaborate, an hour and some change long smokescreen to avoid accountability. And also you have to ask yourself, like, why are you going so hard to be able to make transphobic and homophobic jokes? Why are
Yeah.
you going so hard for that? Like, why is that so important to you? Like, why is that something you feel like you need to be able to do? And that's a question that I really want cis people in general to really ask themselves. Like, really ask yourself why it's important for you to be able to joke about some shit that you are. Ooh, is it okay if I curse? I'm
Yeah, fuck
cursing.
yeah.
I'm
I
sorry.
was like, we go cursing.
And so why is it like okay for you to try to make a joke about some many things that you don't even have the range to intellectualize?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think
If you have the context.
something I'm realizing just listening to this panel, it's something I was thinking about, but I didn't like couldn't articulate it, is like I'm starting to realize like he frames this whole special as if he's trying to talk to the trans community, but the audience he's going for is really conservatives in Trump states. Like that's who he's actually talking to, and he is just trying to normalize and give permission. He's trying to, whether he realizes it or not, is trying to say to those people, hey, that transphobia that you state, the racism that you state, saying, you know, the N-word, like that's okay. It's okay. I'm saying it's okay. I'm giving you permission. Whether he
Mhm.
realizes or not, he's normalizing that language and that discussion in those spaces, and he's framing it in a way that's like, I'm talking to the trans community, so it comes across as like him being, again, that sort of like almost like I'm gifted, like I'm trying to come across as like I'm the good person in this one. I'm trying to create a conversation, but really he's not creating a conversation. He's trying to shut down the conversation, weaponize the anger towards the trans community, like with his story about Daphne at the end, and then normalize and give permission for transphobia to communities that Trump supporters, more conservative
Mhm.
areas. Again, I don't know if that's conscious or not. I feel like he's smart enough to be aware of that, but I don't know. But that's just something that's making me realize just hearing everyone speak here.
It's
Um,
just
Yeah, he's
unfortunate. Oh, sorry.
He's
say,
either a brilliant bigot or an incompetent writer. Those are the only two options.
Damn. I just feel like it's so sad too in my mind in a way, because at the end, of course, there's the thing that gets everybody's going, talks about empathy. I was like, you weren't so empathetic this whole hour in 7 minutes. Okay, sure. But it makes me sad because, and like you're saying, Jesse, I don't know if he's realized it or not, but like how he is now going to be used. Like you, in the same way of knowing your responsibility, having a huge platform. Because I think Chris Rock made this joke a long time ago. He was like, I don't want to be Oprah. I want to be the guy that signs Oprah's checks, like something like that or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like Dave Chappelle is, yes, very, very large platform, very wealthy, isn't as powerful as the who the theys, whatever. But I don't know why. Anyway, but he's still like, it's unfortunate how he might not see, or maybe he doesn't care because he's got the check cleared, how he is being used because of his black maleness, because black men have been in the collective conscious for a while, but especially the last couple of years, because people don't want to be maybe caught disagreeing with what a straight black man says, because they're fine disagreeing with Lil Nas X. They just don't want to be caught disagreeing with a black man that could be killed by the police. Because of that, his popularity, you're going to have people that will guilt watch it because they want to support center black voices, support black comics, all that stuff. You're going to have people watch it because they're just like, oh, I grew up with Dave Chappelle. I like him, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But either way, at the end of the day, you are being used as a vessel because of your because of your marginalized status. You're being used in that way as why Netflix will stand behind you as, oh, well, Dave Chappelle, if he was a white comedian, Netflix probably would have dropped him a lot quicker, I think, which is kind of weird, interesting times that we're living in. This is just a suspicion, not fact, but this is just my little
I agree.
You know, but because he's black, Netflix looks good standing behind this black man who is being homophobic and transphobic the whole time while saying, I'm not transphobic.
You it's very much a step and fetch it routine.
Sorry?
It's very much a step and fetch it situation.
Great way of putting it. Jesse, you brought up a good point a little while ago. You're talking about the people he's telling these jokes to. And I think on that, and you're absolutely right in saying that he's presenting like the illusion that he's talking to trans people when he's making these jokes, when he's trying to make these points, or like queer people in general. But ultimately, he is pandering to a base that just learned they, them pronouns this past year. That these people who have no real plug into what's been going on in queer spaces for many years now. These are people that still listen to Joe Rogan and think that, you know, him having certain guests on there is, you know, giving exposure to queer people and is a positive or a net positive for progression for queer folk.
And one other thing that I would like to add, and I guess it's just important to me, given the sort of criticism I have faced around this issue, I personally don't think Dave Chappelle's previous 3 specials were particularly transphobic. There were a handful of jokes that, no, he wasn't qualified to tell. I didn't care. What bothers me more in his specials is the constant rape apologetics and the blatant anti-blackness, because he is consistently denigrating and tossing Black women under the bus. It has nothing to do with the trans issue for me. It's the fact that he does not give a shit about Black women.
lesbophobia too, because he was joking about beating up a lesbian and then called
Yeah.
the lesbian a man.
Think about the cheekbones. I was like, I just wrote
Yeah.
down like, oh, you can tell someone's a woman or not by cheekbone. Oh, I didn't know that being a woman is only about having a vagina or having a. Sorry, he just kept saying
Yeah.
pussy, and I was like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the jokes about child molestation straight out the gate. But
oh my
Yeah.
god,
That shit hurt.
yeah.
Well, the
but,
opening,
I mean,
the opening of the special is just deflection. He's just speaking as a comedian. I can see what he's doing. I can watch the device. It's very basic. He's leading with
course.
a series of very quick, over the top, offensive statements, so that when he gets to his actual point, which is I don't like trans people, he can say, well, I offended everybody. It's fine.
Yeah, I get so many comments on my Dave Chappelle videos like, well, he made Jewish jokes, he made Asian jokes, he made jokes, and the trans people are the only one offended. Number one, that erases the fact that there were, Jewish and Asian and many other folks who were calling out his jokes as offensive. So that erases that. But yeah, it just goes back to that exact point of like, he's just trying to just say, he's doing the South Park thing where he's just like, oh, I make fun of everybody so that when I do something really horrible and targeted at, punching down at a like marginalized community or racing a marginalized community, it's like, oh, well, I did it to everybody, so it's okay.
and
was
even
just
him
adding
saying,
that to my list. Like, why are you
and
giving
no,
us
that's a
more
good point.
reasons?
Yeah,
But even
yeah.
him saying punching down requires you to think less of someone. It does not. It requires
No.
our collective to think less of that entire and put the entire group of people. One is a monolith. I'm making lists today like crazy. Like anyway, but it requires you to think that entire group is a monolith, and then the entire society, the way society views that group. That's why it's punching down. Your individual feelings about the queer community, even if they were meant with the best of intentions, didn't come across in that special. As much as you tried to make it seem like they didn't. And it did feel like you were punching down the whole time. Or, again, trying to stand on our necks so that you could feel better about it.
Extremely effective.
And when my little brother was watching it, like, because I heard some of the jokes, that was the first time I heard the they joke, and I laughed a little. And he was like, my brother's like 20. And he listens to like Lil Nas X and whatever. Like he's part of the Gen Z that like they're just kind of a bit more laid back. Everything's a little bit queer. You're kind of like,
Yeah.
like everything's a little wink. So like he gets to see all this sort of representation, and like he's straight, but he's just like, yeah, whatever. Like he knows I'm queer, whatever. But like it was still disheartening because I gave him a lecture before he went to work. Poor guy. He's just like standing there chilling, and I was like, people are dying. People are getting murdered, and Dave is out here, and blah, blah, blah. My little brother was just like, it's just a joke, man. And I was like, but it's not a joke. And that's the sad part for like someone that's even like him being 20. He's like, no, it's just a joke. It's not that serious. And I'm like, you're allowed to say that though, Abdu, because you're a black guy. It's not that funny for the rest of us. It's not that funny for a lot of other people that have real experiences with this. Like you can laugh. And then you can turn your computer off and go live your life. And yes, you are a black man, so you have some worry out there. I'm not going to take that away from you. But you don't have to think about the jokes that he made after the fact. Because at no point did I hear him making fun of other black dudes. Like I'm trying to remember.
Never.
Did that happen?
Never.
No.
Nope.
And it never will.
Damn.
And he used to do that back in the day, but he probably realized that like those skits like that one where he like did crack or whatever, he realized I'm being laughed at. That's it.
But here it is. There it goes.
But he can't apply it to anyone else.
See, you are being laughed at, so you didn't want too many. You walked away from $50 million because you didn't want too many white folks getting too comfortable being able to say that stuff. If a joke isn't that serious, then why'd you stop, Dave?
Yeah, that's the thing is it's just jokes, but your jokes have meaning. That's part of the art. That's part of the beauty of them. And I think going back to people talking about the entitlement that people have towards others' culture, I think there's also this entitlement that I can say whatever I want. And Dahlia made a beautiful, beautiful point on that. Just like there's It's frustrating to see this entitlement and this all of this unfolding. I
Yeah.
wanted to insert really quick because I haven't even had to ask questions. This has been incredible. But if I could insert and say, it has been very focused on his potential cancellation, which I'm sure we're all rolling our eyes at. Like, dude, you're rich, you're fine. I'm sure you're okay. But and I was glad to see the Netflix workers speaking out and saying, like, here are the ways we can help the trans community and especially BIPOC people. They staged a walkout calling for investment in trans talent, recruitment of trans people for leadership roles in the company, adding disclaimers before content that includes hate speech, transphobia, etc. What would you like to see for justice on this? I think they've really got it on the Netflix side of things, but this is really something rippling throughout communities, including the comedians and what their experience. So, what do you see as your steps you'd like to see people taking?
From my
As far
experience, oh, my apologies.
No, you first, dear.
Oh my God, I love you.
My
Okay,
God.
so my idea about this stuff is when it comes to cancellation, and my history of like social media and seeing stuff of people who should be canceled, I basically learned that like people cannot be canceled if they're like dominated by like the white man populace. They have to deplatform themselves. So if anything, I feel as if Dave Chappelle should speak out on it, deplatform himself if anything. Because other than that, I don't see much happening. But that's just from what I've seen. It's like, for example, James Charles and that history, he's still not canceled. He's still here.
No.
I don't know what to do about it. So
I mean, who have we seen meaningfully canceled, especially that's got the money he does?
exactly.
From a show business perspective, no one, literally no one has ever been canceled. No one. People have retired, people have died, or people have gone to jail for committing a felony. They were not canceled.
I think the only person I've ever seen like canceled, and that would be Jenna Marbles because she deplatformed herself
Yeah.
because of what she said.
Again, retired.
In a way, yeah, retired basically. Yeah.
And
I think what's sorry.
go for it.
I think one of the things that like has frustrated me, and it happens all the time, and I'm sure none of us are at all surprised by it, but like how the canceling narrative is used to create a version of the trans community that does not actually exist. Because one of the things that I was really pleased with the Netflix walkout and their ask towards Netflix was that none of it, there was not one demand of removing the special. It was not take down the special. It was about placing that special within a conversation and actually having an actual like nuanced discussion about it, because removing it removes the ability for us to have this whole panel, for us to have these interesting discussions of the specific parts where he talked about these different things and missed intersections. It's about the conversation. And what the cancellation narrative does is it frames the trans community, the LGBTQ community, all these communities as just wanting to shut people up. And then it gets into that free speech argument that we're trying to turn down free speech. And I look in spaces, like I was on Reddit 2 days ago after like the Netflix special. And one of the biggest trending videos on Netflix was Netflix workers attacks a man for showing up with a "We support Dave Chappelle" sign. And if you watch the video, it was a dude walking into the middle of the entire crowd of Netflix workers, holding up a "I love Dave Chappelle" sign and screaming and yelling that, and then them just taking his sign. They didn't hurt him or anything. Took the sign and tossed it away, and then just said, "Can you please leave?" And there was actually people protecting him from getting attacked, like stepping in front of him from making sure that he wasn't hurt or anything like that, just getting him out of that crowd because he was there to instigate. But if you looked at all the comments were like, "Oh, look at all this Netflix workers. These trans people are just awful, trying to hurt this poor man for just trying to speak his mind, for just trying to speak up." And it's the danger of this. I mean, it's what the right and many conservative groups try to do, is just paint the Black community, the trans community, all of the different communities as not reasonable, demanding cancellation, demanding to shut people down, when what we're asking for is to create conversation and enable more voices, especially marginalized groups, the LGBTQ community, the Black community, other marginalized communities, to have a bigger voice in the conversation about our own issues and our own discussions. Like Dave Chappelle does not get to dominate the transgender discussion, and so it's frustrating.
And I will acknowledge, as a comedian, stand-up comedy in particular is tokenizing by its very nature. We are working off of whatever identity makes each of us unique. That's the reality of stand-up. Sorry, everyone. We're not saints, we're entertainers. And with that in mind, though, I think of stand-up comedy the same way I think of hip-hop. And that is, talk about what you know. So even if you're going to tokenize me, if you want to hear a really good joke about someone in a wheelchair, the best person to find is a comic in a wheelchair. They've thought of every possible joke for that scenario. If you want to hear jokes about trans people, I got you. I have a phone book full of the names of transgender comics who are more than happy to make jokes that many of them poke fun at us and our experiences and our perceptions of our own appearance. They just happen to be funny.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no.
Okay. Just making sure. I'm trying to be polite. I'm so sorry. Just kind of like looping back to as well. I think something that is really we kind of talked about how it was like fucked up that he kind of weaponizes his friend's death to basically make an excuse to say like, yo, like canceling is really bad. Like this girl got canceled on Twitter and it resulted in her taking her life. Like using that as a shield is something that I think is like really shitty, but within that, I feel like he's doing it in a way where he's almost like capitalizing on the cancellation, right? Where he's taking like somebody who had like a negative outcome and then capitalizing on that to say like, look, canceling is bad, while also profiting off of being like a cancelable comedian, right? Because like a lot of people that are successful in a lot of these spaces, like right off the top of my head, the number one person that I think of is like Blair White. Like her entire brand is like your problematic fave, right? Like she built her brand on being somebody who was disagreeable, on somebody that like, the SJWs and the liberals love to hate and blah, blah, blah. So I feel like part of the problem is that like within the idea of like canceling Dave Chappelle, he's actually like getting what he wants, right? Because he's getting that like notoriety and that infamy of being like the guy that like everybody hates because his jokes are so good, even though it's just because he's kind of being a dick, right? And I think as far as the Netflix things go, I think it's really interesting because Netflix, I don't know if any of you watched the Disclosure documentary. I thought that was a really good documentary, and it talks a lot about how like media will shape how like trans people are treated. Like we are jokes because people made jokes about us for so long, right? Like the man in a dress like performing, or kind of how like trans people are the punchline of jokes, like that episode of Family Guy where Brian throws up for like 10 minutes because he accidentally slept with a trans woman and stuff like that. Like how that will shift people's understandings of us to like being the butt end of a joke, and it like dehumanizes us on a different level. So I find it interesting that Netflix is able to like produce this really wonderful documentary that talks about the harm of normalizing jokes about trans people and normalizing like just like negative perceptions of us in media, but they're just totally cool when trans people are like, yo, like this is actually really fucked up. Like we shouldn't be like platforming this kind of stuff. Like jokes are funny. Yes, I agree. Like we do have a sense of humor, but like they have to be funny, right? And they have to be original and they have to like mean something. So I feel like that it's just weird to me that Netflix can produce something like Disclosure and then at the same time be like, well, Dave Chappelle was just joking, guys. Like, learn how to take a joke, right? Like that cognitive dissonance is really strange to me. And I feel like if they would just like watch the documentary that they produced, they would find the answers to like what to do about the Dave Chappelle situation. Like literally, you guys produced it. Just fucking watch it. It answers your own questions, right?
Funny because as Lauryn Hill said, it could all be so simple, but you'd rather make it hard. Like they really, that is my favorite thing to say to people, because I'm just like imagine a panel like this on a major news network talking about this. There would be a lot more people actually invested in this. But because like, I can't remember who said this, but I'm sorry, most of us are not on Twitter canceling people every hour.
Wait,
I imagine everyone on this panel has a busy schedule. Lumi, I can't speak for you, but everyone else is quite busy.
Lumi is so mean, honestly.
Like disrespectful. We'll talk about it later. That's a private thing. You didn't know that's an intervention. But
My DMs are always open, okay? So if anybody wants to talk shit about Lumi, I'm there.
you know what I mean? Like the
kidding.
whole thing is that like controversy sells and virtue signaling sells. So the documentary Disclosure I thought was really good too. But I was like, I'm from a certain perspective experience. So I'm like, I think it's good, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, if you want to learn about trans rights, watch it. Because that's not right. But to me, it's Netflix wanting to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be, oh, look at us. Look at how many shows we have with biracial black people. Look at how many shows we have with all the diversity. There are gays everywhere. Have you seen Sex Education? Like they want to do that and then turn around and platform Dave Chappelle and say, we're not going to get rid of it. And I don't think they should remove it from the platform, because more likely, more people are like, I'd say this group where you want to have these nuanced conversations and get down to the business and really like, and debate healthily and agree and disagree, but still come to a point of, as he was trying to say in the special, seeing each other's actual humanity at the end of the day when you strip all the not bullshit, but do you know what I mean? Like when you strip all of the poor choice of words. Hello. But when you strip away the things that people perceive as things that would make me not even understand that you are human at the end of the day, right? Like at the very bare bones, very simplistic idea, right? More people are going to want to have these kinds of conversations. I am a cautious optimist, so I believe that. I'm probably wrong, but like I'm just talking about my corner of the internet, whatever, are into that than they are into debating and fighting each other. But people, advertisers, the people that are up, that want the money, just think that they can only make money off of controversy. So it is, like you're saying, it's even better for him to make a living off of being canceled all the time. I think Bill, what's his name?
Bill Burr.
Bill Burr.
I don't remember which Bill it is, but
Louis C.K. is another one too.
Yeah, like they make their money off of supporting people that have been canceled, and then they invite people that are on the extremes of the political spectrum to debate each other. And it's like, you can hear hard truths from a different perspective without it turning into watch who owns blah, 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 and watch blah, blah, own this person in 2 arguments. Like, it's very like, I don't know. I think
and
in my mind,
in the comedy world, we refer to these people as edgelords, and edgelords are hack by their very nature. It's all based on their fantastical narrative surrounding like the early rugged days of comedy, when comics could get arrested for saying something about gay rights on stage. But you're dealing with a completely different situation. One, we don't have that censorship system in place anymore. So you're not revolutionary. You're not doing anything. You're not going to get arrested. You're not going to lose any money. You're not going to lose your shitty fan base, because those idiots still love you. So it's hack. It's hack to build your comedy career off of controversy. Just write a good joke.
Being canceled is actually safe in many ways, because what being canceled means is that you are telling your audience that you are justified, that they don't have to look out at the other conversations around your content. That it's like, don't look at what they're saying because they're just trying to cancel me. So when people say, oh, I'm being canceled, it's hurting my career, it's like, no, being canceled is just a way for you to insulate yourself from any criticism. And it's actually the safe thing for you to do, because it just justifies everything that you do is correct and denies any ability to anyone to create a conversation around your work, because then they're just seen as trying to take you down and just being haters, instead of actually being like, no, I'm trying to come at you with a conversation about what you started. You started the conversation here. So why don't you want to have it,
Nobody asked for this, Dave. You could have done the 3 other specials. It's giving. Who asked is my question. Did you ask?
Always giving.
I'm just wondering which one of us asked for this special. Because I don't hate Dave Chappelle.
Nobody.
But I'm confused. And also, canceling, it's like, you can do it because you'll have somebody with wide open arms. Big Papa, big cancel. Is that what, I don't know? Big Pharma, big cancel, where they will open their arms wide to you and embrace you because they're like, oh, people don't want to hear the truth with a lowercase t. I'm like,
well, it's the diverging of it's. Netflix is trying to be this platform where it can have its cake and eat it too, where it can have like, look, we can support trans people. Oh, we can have the Dave Chappelle special, and it's a platform where like both of these things are coexisting together, despite the cognitive dissonance of those things, because Netflix is trying to just be there for everybody. But we're starting to see a distinct push. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's nonsense, but we see the nonsense of like Trump saying they're going to create their own social media platform and their own, by the way, the other thing that they said is like, we're going to create our own streaming platform now. It was part of that announcement that like they're going to make their own content now. And it's just like the separating of like not actually having conversations with each other, but siloing everyone off into their own distinct worlds and realities instead of bringing people together. And so that's what canceling does. It's like when you get canceled, it's just moving on to the next phase of your career. Like Gina Carano is the one I can even think of. She made a bunch of horrible, shitty trans jokes, got removed from the Star Wars show, claimed she was canceled, and was picked up by Ben Shapiro. So now she's just going to be a conservative, right-wing content creator. And so she just shunted off into one place or the other instead of like platforms like Netflix, which are trying to have both, but are ultimately speaking to two entirely different audiences.
It's a very intentional strategy. You say something that you know is going to be controversial. Say something that some group of people is going to take umbrage with it. You claim that what you're saying is being censored, that your truth that you're trying to tell the rest of the world is not being accepted by a certain sect of people, and then at least a large part of your fan base will come in to rally behind you and support you 10 times more than what they were before, as well as and in that same process, other people who express the same or similar kinds of opinions and ideologies as you will swoop in and say, hey, this is an opportunity for me to come in and promote this person or have this person on my show, or doing work for me that will help elevate my status as a political pundit, or some media mogul, or some demagogue out there who's trying to just capitalize on this controversy. And it happens time and time and time and time again, and people keep falling for it.
Oh no.
Oh, I thought we lost Dahlia, and I was like, the cat gotcha. And then it was Khadija.
Yeah, I'm also gonna have to head out in just a few minutes too.
Yeah,
So just
I saw we're 5 minutes away. And I know you're running off to charity stream, aren't you?
Mhm.
I'm gonna be rating in. It's so freaking perfect. This panel right into a trans lifeline charity stream. Welcome back, Khadija.
sorry, my sister called me. They don't take me seriously.
No. Okay, so one last question for last thoughts. And with that last thought, if you would also like to shout yourself out, because I do realize we're like 4 minutes away. So what, if you could say anything to Chapelle or a Chapelle fan, what would it be? And where do you want us to follow you and go support you? We'll start with Gapped and just go down the line.
Okay, love that for me. All right. Any words I would say to like him and his fans? I probably wouldn't say anything. I'd rather them just sit there, shut up, and listen to like what those marginalized communities are talking about, actually, because that's why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I'm just saying. But other than that, this has been a great panel. Again, sorry for being late. I'm really sad about the eyeliner still, I'll be honest. It's Gapped on all social media platforms. I will be streaming today in like 2 hours actually for like Back for Blood. If you like zombies, check me out, I guess. Other than that, yeah, a pleasure. I think I followed all of you. If I haven't, we'll get there. Bye, loves.
I guess that's me next down the line. So for me, I guess to just say like, it's the thing that I always try to say about everything is like try to find the conversations rather than the dead ends in a talking point. Like, oh, we're canceled, so we can't. Like, open yourself up to hearing conversation and allow the conversation to be imperfect and allow people to screw up within it, but also making sure that you are not perpetuating harm within that, and like being open to like, I'm gonna screw things up. I'm sure I've said stupid things both in this panel and other places, but being aware to like have the self-awareness to be like, yeah, no, I fucked up or I did something wrong. And just allow yourself to have that conversation, but never let yourself or other people off the hook for when they do perpetuate harm, but just try to move forward and acknowledge it. So that's what I would say. That's my hope with this special, and I am glad that panels like this exist. And I've learned a lot just from everyone on this panel. So thank you to everyone here for being awesome. I've been a fan of quite a few of you, and I will be a new fan of quite a few more of you as well for a while. So you're all lovely. So as for me, you can follow me at Jesse Gender on the YouTubes, on the Twitters, where when I'm not canceling people on the Twitters, I'm usually ranting about Star Trek or something like that. So that's usually me. So that's everything that I have to say. You're all lovely, and I adore you all.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jesse. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, so this is my turn. So what I would say is I would encourage and invite people who occupy these spaces to reach outside of their cishet bubbles, where the main people leading these conversations about trans people are the cishet people, making jokes, making propagating these misconceptions every which way, and actually seek out information about trans people, about queer people, about people that you just recently discovered by those people leading those discussions in our own spaces. You'll find much better comedy. You'll find much more enriching experience consuming their content, and overall, it will open your eyes and help you to realize how misguided the people that you were listening to before, and open your eyes to expose you to the hopefully the systemic oppression and systemic issues that we have been facing since forever. And that is my invitation, that is my challenge to people who think that Dave Chappelle was correct and was on point in everything that he was saying. As far as my own socials, you can find me, as Lumi said earlier, I'm a mod for them on this lovely channel. I've been doing that for a while. Is it already? It feels like it's been a while.
It's been a while. Thank you.
And I've loved every second of it. As far as my personal life, you can find me on Instagram as Juicebox, JUICEBOKS, Juicebox. I write poetry. I talk about things through my own art form that I choose the written word. That's been my passion for as long as I could write. And look out for a personal project that I'm going to be doing with my brother. I won't spoil it right now, but it's gonna be big, and I'd love for everybody here to go in
and hopefully Juice will pop on and shout it out.
Yeah,
when it's
absolutely.
in the works. Yeah.
You'll definitely see, if you stay tuned to the channel, you'll definitely see it on again at some point. So
thank you so much.
Seeing my face, hearing my voice, stick around.
Thank you so much, Juice. I appreciate it, both for your work and your voice on the panel today.
Thank you. Love you all. Have a good day.
Is it? Do we all just leave after we say
so.
Sorry.
The first one did, and then there were 5.
That's a pattern we have now.
I started noticing. I was like, do I gotta just get ready to?
A lot of people are getting canceled on this panel about canceling. Pretty fucked up, honestly.
The slow cancellation. We're beyond canceling Dave Chappelle. We're canceling ourselves.
Literally. I won't lie. I thought you were just kicking people out. I was like,
I know. I'm
chill
like,
out.
I would not.
I was like, I get you have something to do, but calm down.
I guess I'm next. Why are you loud? Why are you wrong? Is what I would say to that. I'm kidding. I would say that's not nice. It's Scorpio season. I had to come with a bit of bite.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, man, I honestly don't know. I'm not
That's
trying to
fair.
I genuinely have no clue what I'd say, because my hope is that I would be able to be in a space with somebody that's like that, to talk to them like person to person and be like, hey, because I feel like it's a lot harder to justify that kind of hate speech if you're speaking to someone that is actually affected by it, and you can see them as a person before anything else. And I'm a filthy hippie, so I get that that's kind of annoying language to use at times. I'm trying to be self-aware about it, but I just am very woo woo woo. I don't know if some of y'all will get that, but
interestingly,
sorry.
Interestingly, I don't know that that's what happened. I had a conversation one-on-one, and it seemed like they were so busy empathizing with him that you had to, and so I struggle just from, you got to go back to the very basics of oppression isn't just hating someone. It's a lot deeper than that. But so it's hard to know what to say. It can be hard.
That's very true. Yeah. Because that's me, I'm speaking for smaller experiences of talking to people that I wouldn't have agreed with or still don't agree with, but seeing them soften as they speak, as the conversation goes on, because they stop for a second and are like, oh, right, people. As opposed to, the people that are, how could I put this? Ancestrally bigoted. I don't know. It's in the DNA, it's not even just taught. It's passed down as a rite of passage. Those people, I really don't know what to say. It's funny, but it's not funny, but that's it. I didn't really say anything. You can find me at Khadija Mo anywhere. Last name is spelled M for Mary, B for boy, OWE. My first name is KHADIJA. No H at the end. Autocorrect likes to play with me. Yeah, that's it. I won't just leave unless you want me to.
That's up to you.
Oh God.
But chat.
Pressure's on.
If they disappear, you know what happened. It was me.
I should just keep pretending to talk, and in the middle of it, cut myself off and hang up.
No.
And then post a Twitter thread about it where it's like, Lumi canceled me live.
I used to cancel Lumi.
Yeah. I would support that. I would be like, yeah, it was crazy. They just hung up on everybody. It was the worst thing I've ever seen.
I want to hear other people's socials, so I'm just going to quietly stay on.
I respect that. Yay, a team player. So what would I tell those people? I would tell them that my Venmo is at Dahlia Bell and my Cash App is $ Dahlia DeLu. And I love when people follow me on Instagram. That's where I have the most fun. I post jokes. I post adorable pictures of myself. There are a few pictures of my booty hole. It all depends on how many drugs I've taken that day. So yeah, come hang out. It will be fun.
Thank you so much, Dahlia.
Wait, what's this?
On Instagram at Miss Dahlia Bell.
Oh my God! Now you saying I gotta get this. Not after the booty hole comment, I'm screaming.
I would probably just tell people, like everyone else on the planet, trans people and queer people and LGBT people have a sense of humor. Your jokes just fucking suck. So write better jokes, and then maybe nobody would be mad at you. It kind of seems like a problem of your own creating that could be very easily resolved by just, I don't know, getting a sense of humor and learning how to take a joke. I don't know. It's quite ironic. I stream on Twitch. It's Sergeant Pepper, but the G is a 9. It's very confusing. It's really easy to find me on YouTube. It's just Goddammit Malcolm. I mostly talk about transmasculine stuff because there's not a lot of masculine representation on like Twitch and politics, stuff like that. I mostly go over like like popular media stuff about trans people. Right now, I'm reading Irreversible Damage on stream for the second time. Only irreversibly damaging my brain cells, unfortunately. And then we're reading End of Gender. I do that kind of stuff. And I also host all Trans Mask Everything panels, where we talk about trans issues through like a trans masculine perspective. I do those every Sunday. And yeah. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate hanging out with everybody. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Malcolm. I appreciate you joining us. And I didn't get to say thank you to Dahlia as well. I appreciate you taking the time out of both of your days to make it here and have this discussion with us. So thank you. And last but certainly not least, Sonata.
What would I say to them? I would say that like I feel sorry for them in a way. Like I feel bad that like especially like being a Black non-binary person, despite the things I experienced, the oppressions, it's so liberating not being tethered to any of that BS. It's so liberating to not have to conceptualize my entire identity around toxic, like normalized things that are actually really toxic and harmful. And I would just tell them, why are you going so hard to be able to do something that could harm people? Why is that something that's so essential to you and essential to your humor? And again, you need to be funnier. You need to get actual sense of humor because I think I'm hilarious. Like I'm hilarious. Anybody that's around me, they laugh all the time, but I'm never saying slurs or just dismissing people's experiences or homogenizing people. Like you just don't have to do that. And I just encourage people to get a sense of humor and a sense of humanity. Really and really read a book, read Black feminist literature, because like if people read Black feminist literature, we wouldn't be dealing with none of this stuff. Like people would just like know that these things are just, but there's all this knowledge out here for you to read. No Name, the rapper, has a great book club. She sends books to people, incarcerated people. Go join her book club, please, for the love of everything good on
Radical
this
Hood
planet.
Library.
Yes.
What?
Read a book. Like if you're not gonna listen to us, like read a book. Like just and then that will make you really just change the way you think about things. Also my socials and stuff like that. Like I said earlier, I am a digital artist, photographer, videographer. I do graphics. I do really like everything. I'm a real Gemini. I do literally everything. And my names on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter are all Spice Cam Visuals, just like my name in this video right here. Spice Cam Visuals, literally just like that. If you want to follow me like on my personal Twitter for jokes, that's where I make most of my jokes. It's Spice Daddy with 2 E's at the end, SPICEE Daddy. And yeah, I'm an artist who's also like an academic. I left academia because they suck there, but I can take myself out of academia, but I can't take the academic out of myself. So I still occasionally rant about these things and still talk about them frequently. So yeah, follow me.
Thank you all. Thank you for making the time again to come on. I really appreciate it. And thank you all so much for the conversation. I didn't even have to say anything. I just pop in, ask a question, and we're going. That was beautiful. So thank you again. And if there's anything I can ever do, feel free to hit me up. I really appreciate the conversation. You all have a lovely day.
Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.
I love you all.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the panel as much as I did. If so, and you'd like to catch more panels, feel free to hit that subscribe button. And I would love to catch you in chat at twitch.tv/LumiRoo. Drop us a follow there. I hope to catch you around. Until next time, stay cozy.